Technology has come a long way since the 90s, 80s, or even 70s. Through each advancement comes new challenges and new ideas ready for the industry to take hold of. Since the days of beta, CDs, laserdiscs, and the advancing of powerful computers, we have been able to make extraordinary developments. Through each new generation brings new and exciting challenges. Let me take you on a journey through the evolution of gaming. In 1977, Space Wars was developed as an exclusive game that was created using custom software and was the first ever vector-based video game that would later be used as the basis for arcade games and Atari in the late 70s to 80s. But before I go into that, let's talk about something else, a gaming medium that was before all of this, before Ataris and before arcades. Can anyone guess what this was? That is right, pinball machines. The legacy of pinball machines dates back to as far as the 1700s when the origins were intertwined with other games such as ground billiards. In 1930, coins were introduced as well as an electronic form of pinballs. The first digital pinball machines were in the era of the 1970s, before the start of the gaming boom that we would soon be known as the very first video game console ever created, the Atari. The Atari marks the first video game console in development, the extent to which this one company laid the foundation of the modern video game industry. Pong was one of the first video games ever created on a home console. This was truly one of the first video games to reach mainstream popularity and would be the inspiration for many popular titles to follow, such as Pac-Man. The introduction to the arcade is the true beginning of the video game industry and where most of the roots of development stem from. And from 1978, Space Invaders with such iconic titles that are known to this day and still ongoing. Even 30 years later, like Pac-Man, one of the most popular franchises will be introduced in 1982 called Kong, with one of the most beloved characters to ever grace the gaming medium. You know it as Donkey Kong. In 1982, the ColecoVision was released. Not a very popular video game console, but it did one thing that no other video game console did before it, and that was the upgrade in hardware attachments that would later be adapted from other consoles, specifically with the Sega brand of consoles. Sega released 3 different consoles in their time span. The first console was called the Sega Genesis, and was the first console to deliver 16-bit graphics which started to bring a more visual appeal to modern-day games. Instead of layered dots and pixels, the fully two-dimensional sprites were formed for the very first time. Later, the Sega CD introduced something that no other company ever thought of, and that was the first development of CD-based games. That would later turn out to be the future of gaming. By the end of the 90s, Sega released their Sega Dreamcast, which was their pinnacle system from the Sega brand. Unfortunately, this is where Sega came to an end, and no other video game consoles were produced. The leading juggernauts of Sony and Nintendo became the most popular companies in the video game industry and completely shattered the market sales, and the birth of the console wars had begun. Nintendo, one of the largest companies in video game development history, and probably the console that most of us adults all know well when you were growing up. In 1985 was the first inception of the ever-popular Nintendo Entertainment System. This is truly the first video game console to absolutely shatter the market in sales and popularity, and revolutionize the video game industry for years to come. Let's take a look at some of the most lovable and iconic characters to ever exist in the gaming industry. Created by Nintendo like Kirby, Samus, Kong, and the Legend of Heroes' hero Link, and of course your very own popular mascot Mario. As you can see on this slide, the characters' visual design change with each new development and generation into gaming. These characters are still considered popular gaming idols to this day and known by everyone around the world. Nintendo was also responsible for the release of the very first mobile gaming device, which would later become an evolution in the gaming industry. In fact, gaming these days is used practically on any mobile device, right? And whether it be an iPad, laptop, or your Android phone. The Game Boy was a very popular device for this reason and enabled you to play games while mobile. Now let's take a look at a popularity chart. What do you think was the most popular video game console in the 80s? It is the Nintendo Entertainment System, responsible for sporting some of the most amazing video game franchises ever, including the introduction to the very popular Final Fantasy and Mario game series.
It's me, Mario!
The Super Nintendo was the second Nintendo-based system and adapted many sequels and incarnations of previous video game series such as Donkey Kong Country, Mario World, and the popular RPG series Final Fantasy, with which the music of this presentation is based from. This series will be one of the first video game role-playing series that is still ongoing today, with some of the most talented writing and artistic visual design by Yoshitaka Amano. This video game series paved the way for many RPGs in the future. Ken Kutaragi developed cutting-edge 32-bit technology which provided powerful 3D graphics. Thus, the PlayStation was born, which was actually a prototype in collaboration with Nintendo. This was when CD-based technology came to the forefront, and from then on became the basis for Sony-branded consoles. Though cartridges remained with other companies such as Nintendo with the introduction of the Nintendo 64, this eventually took the gaming industry by storm and became the norm for digitalized, computerized graphics. With the release of Nintendo 64, our popular mascot and beloved character Mario returns. The 64-bit system had a much more artistic visual art and graphic design as opposed to the more CG style that the PlayStation used with CDs. Eventually, the graphics of the Nintendo 64 became quite outdated in future years, and so therefore was obsolete, and instead Nintendo's next system, the Wii, developed CD-based games just like the PlayStation. This was the first system to incorporate motion-sensitive controls as well, and one of the first video game console systems that became family-friendly. Many companies took advantage of this by introducing various different motion-sensitive and exercise-related games. Later, Sony adapted the motion sensing for their future gaming console as well. The most popular video game console of the 90s was the Nintendo 64, barely surpassing the PlayStation in both sales. The PlayStation turned out to be one of the most popular gaming consoles of this decade, later to be introduced in the future generations with the same branded name. In March of 2000, the turning point of the millennium when technology grew the most, the PlayStation 2 was born, introducing the first console ever to be a media box. Aside from just a gaming platform, this system was able to play DVD playable discs. But perhaps one of the most important features introduced was backwards compatibility, which enabled you to play PlayStation 1 games on the PS2. This system was to be one of the most predominantly owned systems for the next 5 years until new hardware and new gaming engines were introduced that allowed the use of powerful 3D and almost lifelike visuals. With the most unprecedented 3D visuals ever witnessed on any gaming device, the PS3 and Xbox 360 delivered the next evolution in gaming. Not only did these systems become gaming machines, but pure media boxes with their very own integrated computer operating systems, which allowed for so many more extra features that other previous consoles could never contend with, such as external hard drive support, the ability to play Blu-ray discs, media servers, and access of many different file, video, and audio formats. As evident from this slide, take a look at the picture of the girl depicting Ellen Page in this photo. Can you tell if this is CG or real TV? As we continue further and further beyond the years of development, the line between reality and digital graphics is becoming blurred. This truly became a major technological innovation, the likes of which the world has never seen since the days of Pong. With these new advances in technology and the community at large adapting more social ways of communicating with each other, this opened world for so much more in the video game industry. The online world has opened up a whole new avenue of gaming, and with the future generations of console, the PS4 and Xbox One, they have become a very highly evolved online gaming platform. By this era, the average budget of games has grown to outscale Hollywood movies. There are amazing visual effects, celebrity appearances, and global scale marketing. It has grown into a full-scale entertainment industry.